This video documents 4 stylized facts about U.S. innovation over 1926 to 2001 and 2009. Taken together, they suggest a weakening base for future innovation. I assume innovation is about discovering new combinations of pre-existing technologies. This is an old and intuitive idea. Think, for example, of an internal combustion engine. It's built from components like pistons, crankshafts, and flywheels. These parts existed before the engine, and inventing the engine was about rearranging them in a new and useful way. The data underlying the following slides comes from the millions of U.S. patent grants dating back to 1836. In this paper, I use the technology classifications assigned to patents as proxies for the components that are combined in innovation. Specifically, I use 13,517 mainline patent classifications for reasons discussed in more depth in the paper. These technology classifications are assigned during the patent application process. Most patents get more than one. The pictured patent has 3, and I take this as an indication that it combines these 3 kinds of technology. These mainline subclasses belong to 428 technology fields. Patents can also be sorted into these fields. This one belongs to field 701, data processing, vehicles, navigation, and relative location. I assume at any moment in time, a technology field has a set of technologies its practitioners draw on. They recycle and recombine these technologies to make new inventions. The technologies used by a field are just the ones in the patents that belong to the field. So field 701 uses the 3 technologies pictured here, as well as many others. Research is more productive if its practitioners know how to combine technologies usefully. They learn this from the example of patents. For example, this patent provides an example to researchers in any field on how to combine these 3 particular technologies. This information is certainly useful for field 701 because it uses these 3 technologies, but it may also be applicable in other fields that use some of these components. With this framework, I develop a simple model of innovation. I measure how much researchers know about combining technologies with affinity, defined here. The n sub jt term counts how many patents have been assigned a particular pair indexed by j through year t. For example, if technologies 477/34 and 123/319 from the previous patent have been combined 25 times in other patents by 1990, then the affinity of this pair in 1990 is 1/3, 25 divided by 75. Note that affinity goes from 0 to 1 and increases at a slower and slower rate as n goes up. This captures the notion that combinations get less and less informative. For each technology field, in each year I then compute the affinity stock, which is just the sum of the affinity of all the pairs of technologies used by that field. This is my proxy for how much practitioners in that field know about how to combine the field's technologies. Next, I assume the number of useful technology combinations isn't infinite. It can run out. I account for this with the patent stock, which is just the number of patents granted in that field. I put these 2 measures together in a simple Cobb-Douglas equation. The number of patent applications in year t for field I is a function of its affinity stock and its patent stock, as well as an additional term that I don't discuss in this video. A lot of the paper is devoted to carefully estimating the parameters alpha and beta, the exponents on the affinity and patent stocks, taking into account unit roots, omitted variable bias, and other issues. The results of these estimates are given here. The important thing to note is that alpha is positive and beta is negative in all our estimations. This implies my first stylized fact. Technology fields produce more patent applications when they have more knowledge about how to combine the technologies they use, and when they have fewer patents granted. In other words, technology fields are like ponds that are fished out by discovery. It gets harder and harder to catch new fish if the pond is not restocked by the discovery of novel connections. This matters because my second stylized fact is that patents are making fewer and fewer of these novel connections. Here, I simply plot the increase in the affinity stock of a patent's field due to the patent. This will be larger if patents make more novel connections. It turns out patents have been making steadily less novel connections between technologies since at least the 1950s. Compounding this is my third stylized fact. I define a spillover as another field whose affinity stock is impacted by a patent. Between 1926 and the early 1980s, the number of spillovers per patent grew at a steady rate. Since then, it has stalled at around 26 spillovers per patent. This means the number of fields that learn from the connections in patents has stopped growing. My final stylized fact tries to quantify the impact of these two changes. Every patent increases the patent stock for its own field, which reduces the number of future patent applications. But it may also combine new technologies and thereby increase the affinity stock of its own field, as well as many others. Depending on which effect is stronger, the net impact of a patent can be positive or negative. For each patent in my data, I compute the number of patent applications we would expect in a year if the patent had never been granted. The difference between the actual number of patent applications and this is the net impact of a patent. When positive, the patent's contribution to the affinity stock is big enough so that more patent applications are possible thanks to it. Essentially, we can ask how many fish we are tossing back in the pond for each one we pull out. In this chart, I find the number is initially positive, but the impact falls over time and may even be negative, depending on the estimates used. Thus, the declining novelty of patents, coupled with the halt in applicability to other fields, may entail a weaker base for future innovation. Of course, there are a lot of caveats to this, which is why the title is a question rather than a declarative statement. The paper details some of these. Please check it out for discussion of those caveats and a lot more. Thanks for listening.